Will Damascus opt to defend Syria's narrow interests, or will it defend broader Arab interests? Will Damascus opt for raison de nation, or will Damascus opt for raison d'etat? One indication that Syria's interests are first and foremost is again provided by precedents. Although we will never know if Hafez Assad would have accepted to sign before the Palestinians had he been given all the Golan, we do know that he viewed the secret Oslo talks as a stab in the back. And it is since then that he had delinked the two tracks, saying that the two are independent of one another and one can go faster than the other. And then we have as evidence all those things that Hafez Assad accepted. Total peace for total withdrawal, normalization, mutual security regime, water sharing. And I don't think that Bashar al-Assad will ask for more than his father did. Another indication that Syria is first and foremost is the economic paradigm shift that Syria is currently undergoing. Syria wants to be integrated into the world market economy, and Syria now has private banks and private insurance companies. It has a stock exchange. It has investment and brokerage firms and private universities. Sheraton and Four Seasons hotels are in Syria now, and so is Deloitte and Touche, Ernst & Young, and KPMG. And so is Kentucky Fried Chicken. And Dunkin' Donuts. And the list goes on. Indeed, Syria is changing course. The distance Syria crossed from the consumption of the Ba'athi variant of radical Arab nationalism to the consumption of Dunkin' Donuts is impressive. This may lead the observer to conclude tentatively that if Israel commits to a withdrawal to the June 4th lines, Syria will sign before the Palestinians. But I don't believe things are as straightforward as this. Again, Arabism, though it is declining and a declining predictor of Syria's behavior, it continues to be constraining. Signing a peace treaty without Palestinians, I think, compromises Bashar al-Assad's position on the Arab street. And while the big question is, will Bashar al-Assad trade Syria's role as the champion of Arabism in exchange of the Golan? Again, this was the debate, and to many it seemed unimaginable. And what makes me more cautious about this conclusion of Syria first is when I interviewed a very senior official whom I will not name, he answered, "We cannot do what our people cannot imagine." And so there must be some formula to be worked out, one in which peace between Syria and Israel is accompanied by at least some real progress on the Palestinian-Israeli track. In the final analysis, what we can say for sure is that peace between Syria and Israel is not impossible, but that Middle East peace without the Palestinians is impossible. And that is why I think if there's going to be peace in the Middle East, it is going to have a comprehensive settlement. Thank you.
Murhaf, thank you very much. Well, now, Daniel, you have the pleasure of wrapping up all the threads and introducing the new thinking to help bring us to hopefully a more positive outcome and catalyst for some new ideas. So over to you. Uh-oh, Daniel. So over to you, and we look forward to your remarks.
Thanks. Toni has asked me to kind of reset the table. What I want to do is exactly that, but before doing so, share perhaps 5 observations, introductory observations with you, and with that, then get to the table and try to reset our policy agenda. First observation, we were hearing from some pundits around town and in newspapers that perhaps because things are going badly, we ought to walk away from the peace process. Well, you've heard today from our panelists, with whom I agree fully, that the idea of walking away from the peace process simply misses the point. if indeed peace in the Middle East between Arabs and Israelis is a United States national interest, then one doesn't walk away from a policy problem. The second observation I would make is one fixes a policy problem. And the reality is that the first 10 months of the Obama administration, which began so interestingly and productively, have gone astray with regard to our Middle East peace process policy. So that rather than think about walking away from the peace process, from the peacemaking process, one ought to focus attention on fixing the policy and trying to make it work. The third observation is that one hears around town with increasing frequency, including on this panel, that maybe it's time to experiment with a one-state solution. In other words, the idea that the two-state solution may have run its course. Now, the reality is that for about 80 years, we have known that there is only one outcome that's going to work if the Arab-Israeli conflict is going to be resolved, and that is partition, a two-state solution. So rather than Abu Mazen experimenting with a one-state solution, rather than Bibi Netanyahu experimenting with a one-state solution which effectively would result from a continuation of settlement activity, one ought to rededicate oneself to the idea of a two-state solution and not experiment with ideas that have been proved not to work in the past. The fourth introductory comment would be that our panel today was asked to focus a little bit on domestic politics, and they're certainly important. But I have to tell you, after too many years in government and a few years out of government, domestic politics is not my problem when it comes to somebody else's polity. Now, for American policymakers, our domestic politics are important. And in this respect, I would argue that the Obama administration has not only the tools to do this job, but also has the necessary political support. Some 78% of the American Jewish community voted for Barack Obama last year. And a large part of that community support remains the president's. The president has the kind of domestic support that he needs to embark on an ambitious and aggressive peace process policy. Now, you heard today very, I would say even brilliant expositions of the politics within the Palestinian community and within Israel, and it's interesting. As an academic, I find it fascinating, in fact. But as a policymaker, I want to leave those domestic politics to their leaders. Let them figure out how to deal with their domestic politics. And if they are leaders, they will lead. So rather than predicate our policies on the weaknesses or strengths or successes or failures of someone else's domestic policies, we need to fix our policies, predicated on our domestic support that the American people have given to this administration, and then lay it out. And let the two sides, in this case the Israelis and Palestinians, figure out how to deal with their own domestic issues and how to bring about the kind of support for the policies that we would like them to support, or they may choose not to support it. But if they choose not to support it, they have to know there's going to be consequences in terms of their relations with us, in terms of their relations with others. So the issue of domestic politics, interesting, analytically important, but for policymakers, I would suggest that we focus on the policy rather than on the domestic constraints to that policy.